Mr. Studebaker here, looking at a transaxle on a Sergeant Pepper. I pulled it out so that we can disassemble this and replace all the forward and reverse gears in this and look at the cast iron creeper gear. I have not had one of these apart to look at, so we're going to see this all the first time. When this transaxle received, the creeper gear was not functional in it, so there's something broke on the inside, and I hope it's an easy fix. If not, well then I'll be out a few bucks. But regardless of what's going on here, let's get to tearing this thing apart and see how this goes. So first thing on the agenda is we're going to remove the creeper gear. Now, these bolts are longer than the rest of them, so you'll have to make note and put those in a right spot, however you want to do it. The aluminum creeper gear that comes out of here does not have pins where the cast iron does. I like that already. It locates everything. Hey, that's not supposed to come out. That is supposed to stay inside here. Oh, and look what just made itself apparent. I think I found a problem. There is a pin that goes into this, and it connects to the shaft on the back side over here. So it's like a regular roll pin that goes in there. And there's no roll pin in there. I wonder if this was shipped with a roll pin and they had it non-functional for a long time. Oh, hell, I don't know. But this thing looks pretty cherry on the inside. It looks hardly used. Hardly been shifted into gear. Normally these gears, these guys, oops, sorry about the light. Let's see. These gears right here are normally all beat up. On my aluminum one that I have, these things are at least a good ways down. This thing is in like cherry shape. Oh, that's going to be an easy fix. That could be in business. This guy is in great shape too. Yeah, it's hardly been used. It's like brand spanking new. Oh, Sergeant Pepper's going to be badass. No popping out of gear on this guy. We'll cover the assembly and the fix on that in a later segment. But let's get back to tearing this guy down. So the first thing that you have to do is you have to remove this bolt. This is the brake lever. There's a plunger behind it. So this has this because this has an internal wet brake. So you have to remove the plunger or the adjuster bolt because that also keeps this lever on this shaft. You'll see in a second exactly what I'm talking about. There's a radius cut all the way around on the pin that allows this nut to lock into place. That's this guy right. You'll see it in a second. I'll pound this guy out. And now, if they get sticky, don't be afraid to come around and bash it back because you don't want to break these ears or you're going to be out a whole housing. So we'll just bash this guy out. Pull the plunger out. Here's the plunger. That fits into this guy, and then that pushes on that guy right there, and that's the internal brake pressure on that. And we'll set these guys aside, and then we'll get to tearing this guy apart. Now, I'm not sure what this guy is, but this guy is probably for a belt drive system so they could drive a rototiller in the back. It probably is not going to make it onto Sergeant Pepper because that's another hangy down that could be in the way. So I'll just stash these bolts somewhere, and if somebody wants to buy it, well then by all means, they can have it. But these guys are all the shorter ones. Now, if you guys have a creeper gear and you want to use a creeper gear, make sure you pay attention to the gaskets so you don't break them. But if you do break them, it's not such a big deal because you can put silicone over the brake and then glue them down that way. That way you don't have to replace them. When I did the aluminum one, I didn't have the gaskets on here, and I paid all kinds of dividends trying to get the connection between this guy, this little pinion right here, and this to line up so that they wouldn't be a press fit in there, because when you're running up on the edge or on the inside of that pinion, you get all kinds of troubles. Oh, don't break the gasket, Studebaker. All right, pull that guy off. I got a little broken gasket right there. I'll put a little silicone on that guy, fix him up. But this is the big bull gear. And then there's a little pinion gear up on top of that guy. We'll rip that guy out of there. But before I go any further with that, regarding the second gear condition on this, on the previous segment, we covered why second gear was popping out because it was in the middle of the shaft. Well, I got to thinking about this a little bit more, and when the way this pinion is set up and where the bearing sits is when this gear is running, it's going to send a lot of energy in the rotational, but there's going to be some force that's going to separate it. So what it's going to do is it's going to force this shaft down, and the bearing's going to be on the other side. And what that does is it takes that shaft, the middle part, and puts a little bow in it. It might be insignificant amount, it might be enough, but if it's enough to get second gear to pop out, I want to fix that. Let's get this guy out of here. Pay attention to him because he's different than all the rest of them with the washer. He's a grade 5 bolt, so it's not super strong. Then we'll get this guy out. These are quite handy, little picks to take that out with. And then out it comes. And there's the inner workings of the first stage bull gear pinion gear setup. So what I'm looking at, and what we're looking at, there's a 6205 bearing in there. The 6205 bearing is this little guy in here. And I believe this whole setup in here, this is cast, this is a stamped steel piece in here. I believe that thing is the cause of all my second gear popping out. And what I'm going to do later on is I'm going to go to, this is a single double row, or there's a single deep groove bearing in there. I'm going to go to a double groove, two ball setup on here, angular bearing in there to stiffen this whole assembly up. So there will be modifications to the holder and the outside plate, and we'll make that stronger. This guy is the internal brake. As you can see, there's been some water in there and it's got a little rusty, and I don't think that'll hurt anything. The next step is we're going to take this housing off. And that's 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we'll get those guys ripped out of here shortly. I believe they're 3/4. Let's see. Yep, 3/4. So I'm really anxious to see how this setup is. I've never torn one of these apart. I've gone as far as removing this, but never deep into the transmission. 2 different size bolts. Make note. Long ones on the bottom, short ones on the top. And this guy should pop off. Well, I can hear gaskets ripping. Oh, good. They didn't rip. Oh, the internal brake popped off too. Then, let's see, do I want to save this? I'm just going to leave that on there. I want to get a look at these bearings and see how those set up are on there. Here's a close look on it. I bet they're both 6205s in there. Puller guys, they must change these out and these out to keep them from popping out. I might do things a little different because, you know, I'm different. Let's see, I bet that's 9/16 or 1/2 inch. 1/2 inch. I'm hoping that this whole thing is pinned in here. Oh, yeah. All right, so this is going to require further investigation. This is all for today until I figure out how this thing comes apart later on. Studebaker out.